Hey, what are you doing? Open up. Why don't you just stay here for a while? I was locked in the basement by my husband's child, Ethan. I tried to open the basement door many times, but it wouldn't budge. Originally, I had been in an accident and was using an electric wheelchair. So, I couldn't move well. It's cold. Well, of course. It's 28 degrees right now. Why are you doing this? Then, Ethan started laughing loudly. I've been irritated with you for a long time. What? Pretending to be a mother. You might as well become a mummy staying in a place like this, right? What's wrong with you? We're going on a trip for 3 nights and 4 days. So, try your best until we get back. Please, let me out of here. My cries of anguish did not reach Ethan. Only the sound of his footsteps fading away echoed. I had no choice but to despair, unable to do anything. 4 days after being locked up, Ethan returned from his trip. What is this? Realizing something was terribly wrong, he hurried to the basement. Tentatively, when Ethan looked into the basement, he was met with a shocking scene. While Ethan stood frozen, a grand act of revenge began. My name is Kim, and I work as a salesperson at a cosmetics company. I got married when I was 30. What was different about this marriage was that my husband, Steve, had a child from his former marriage. My parents opposed our marriage because of this. Marrying someone with a child will surely bring hardships. Your father is right. But I want to marry him. I pleaded for hours. Initially, they wouldn't agree, but I didn't give up, and eventually, they consented to the marriage. If you're that determined, I won't stop you. Thanks, Dad. The reason I chose Steve, who had a child, was because I felt very comfortable with him. From the first day we met, we shared common hobbies, such as outdoor activities, and got along well. Our meeting was at a bar I frequently visited. By chance, we sat next to each other and ordered the same drink, which led to a casual conversation. After seeing each other several times, we exchanged contact information. Soon after, my husband contacted me, and we went out for a meal. You brought a child? Actually, he's my child. Huh? Your child? His name is Ethan, and he's turning 10 this year. I see. I was at a loss for words, not knowing how to respond. Sensing this, my husband said something surprising. There's a reason I brought my son today, is because I'm serious about our relationship. I want to marry you someday. I had thought about dating, but I hadn't imagined it would lead to marriage. Being told this with a serious face, we started dating. Since then, we often went out together as 3. It seems like Ethan has warmed up to you. I hope so. Let's ask him. Ethan, come here for a second. What is it, Dad? Would you be happy if Kim became your mom? After a moment's pause, he smiled. I would be very happy. See? That's what he says. Yeah. I was incredibly happy, though a bit embarrassed. At this time, we had been dating for about half a year. A week later, I received a formal proposal and we got married. After the marriage, the 3 of us rented a detached house. Looking up at our new home, I imagined a happy family life ahead. However, our life gradually began to take a strange turn. Although my relationship with the son had been good, he suddenly became cold towards me. I'm sorry, but it looks like I'll have to go on more business trips. Business trips? Is it long? Well, I don't think so, but I might be away from home more often. Although my relationship with Ethan had been good before the marriage, I was anxious about being left alone with him so soon after getting married. And then, one morning, as the days of spending time alone with Ethan increased, something happened. What's wrong? Aren't you going to eat? I don't want any. After that, he wouldn't even respond when spoken to. Suddenly finding myself in this situation made me wonder if I had done something wrong. So I decided to talk to my husband who had just returned from a business trip. Aren't you worrying too much? It's sudden. If I did something wrong, I want to apologize. But you don't remember doing anything, right? Yes, but worrying too much might just make things weirder.
Yeah.
Okay. At this point, I realized something. Recently, Ethan had been taking piano lessons, at my husband's suggestion. It turns out, my husband had also learned piano when he was in elementary school. He had told me that working with your hands is good for the brain. See you next week, Rebecca. Yes. See you then.
Yeah.
He was always smiling when it came to his piano teacher, Rebecca. Even observing his behavior recently, he seemed happiest when he was with her. Why? When my husband was home, Ethan would talk to me casually. But as soon as Steve went on a business trip, Ethan stopped talking to me. Even when he was at home, he would only come out of his room for meals and baths. It was as if he didn't hear me at all when I spoke to him. I tried talking to my husband again, but there was no sign that our relationship was improving. Life went on like this, and before I knew it, Ethan had grown up and gone to college. What should we do now? About Ethan? Yes. Before I knew it, we've gotten to this point. He's an adult now, not a child anymore. But still. My husband's point was to not worry too much about it. Of course, Ethan would eventually leave home and become independent. But I still wanted to improve our relationship. However, discussions with my husband always ended inconclusively. Unable to understand why Ethan might hate me, I decided to ask him directly. Is there something troubling you? Huh? Why are you asking me this all of a sudden? We haven't been talking much lately, and I thought maybe something happened. Ethan sighed heavily and answered reluctantly. Can you just not talk to me? I don't have anything to say to you. You don't have to say things like that. Then, Ethan said something shocking. I've hated you ever since I first met you. What? I don't like the way you look down on people. I was at a loss for words after being spoken to so harshly. Then, my husband, noticing something was wrong, came over. What's going on here? Nothing. That can't be true. What did you say to your mom? I just said I hate her. What's wrong with that? You said what? Apologize to your mom. My husband spoke sternly, trying to admonish Ethan. However, Ethan had already begun to show defiance even towards his father. Why should I? Are you being deceived by her? What are you saying? That's ridiculous. Ethan stood his ground and resisted. If you're going to say that, I'll just leave. That's fine, right? Hey, where are you going? Wait. Ethan left the house. This incident only made his rebellion escalate further. Aren't you going to chase after him? It's okay. Let's just leave him be for now. He'll come back eventually. No matter how harshly he spoke to me, Ethan was still our dear son. I wanted to chase after him, but I chose to wait, believing he would return soon. However, Ethan did not come back the next night. Unable to stay put, I went outside. I thought to myself, he couldn't possibly be near the house. Regretting my impulsiveness for coming out without a plan, I then saw Ethan emerging from a house in front of me. I quickly hid behind a tree. What is he doing here? I stayed hidden until Ethan disappeared into the darkness. When I checked the house he came out of, it turned out to be the piano school he had attended years ago. It was night, but unknowingly, I had come to a familiar road. It had been years since I last visited here. However, I couldn't understand why Ethan had come out of there. Where have you been? I hurried back home and questioned Ethan. I thought I saw you around the piano school earlier. Piano? At that moment, his voice seemed to falter a bit. What were you doing? Why would I go to Rebecca's? That response made me realize I hadn't mistaken him for someone else. My son stopped playing the piano when he graduated from elementary school. Given that he referred to her name instead of as a teacher, it was clear they hadn't met just yesterday or today. I see. Seemingly annoyed, he muttered under his breath. Just shut up, will you? Even though it was already quite difficult for me mentally, his words still shocked me. Then, as if on cue, my husband came home. As soon as Ethan realized his father was home, he retreated to his room. When Steve entered the living room, he looked somewhat exasperated. Did he say something to you again? Huh? You can tell? I can tell just by looking at your face. So, what happened? I told my husband about what Ethan had said to me earlier. Steve then placed a comforting hand on my shoulder and spoke kindly to me. I'm truly sorry. Why are you apologizing? It's partly my fault for not being able to listen properly today. I've been away from home on business trips too often. But it still hurts when he says things like that. As I murmured this, Steve was about to head to Ethan's room. Wait a minute. I grabbed his arm to stop him. Why stop me? I need to talk to him. Just listen. I stopped him because I remembered something I had forgotten to mention. It was about Ethan coming out of the piano school. It wasn't a mistake, and when I asked him about it, he called her by name. Piano? He used to go to lessons around elementary school, right? Yes. I don't know when it started, but they seem to get along well. But why would he? I can't figure out why. That's why I think we should just watch the situation for a bit. Okay, if you say so. I desperately wanted to know the reason. Maybe it was the cause of his harsh attitude towards me. My wish was to resolve this issue and improve our relationship with Ethan. I really want to do something about it. Right. I'll help too. Let's work on this together.
Yeah.
Though I said this to my husband, I couldn't help but wonder if there was more to the story, leading me to investigate Rebecca. For now, we decided to simply observe Ethan. But when things go wrong, they really seem to spiral. On my way home from work, disaster struck. I was hit by a car that ran a red light while I was crossing the street. Are you okay? Sorry for this to happen. What are you talking about? I'm just glad you're safe. But my legs. I had sustained a severe back injury, resulting in spinal cord damage that left me unable to move my legs. So, you mean you can't walk anymore? I nodded silently. I would end up being hospitalized for about half a year. And with you so busy at work for this to happen. It's not your fault, Kim. But you have a business trip tomorrow, right? I'll be fine, you should go home and prepare. That's true, but I'm really okay. All right. Call me if anything happens. My husband left the room. I bit my lip to stop myself from crying. The next day, Ethan came to visit me in the hospital. How are you feeling? I can't move my legs, but other than that, I'm okay. Then Ethan smirked unpleasantly. Can't walk, huh? Now you're completely useless. You don't have to say that. Maybe Dad will divorce you now. I wouldn't mind. His verbal abuse continued. Without retorting, I absorbed his words like a punching bag. Finally, as if satisfied, Ethan turned to leave the room. Just before exiting, he looked back and said, "Well, do your best. I'm not into caregiving, you know." All I could do was watch his back as he left. Alone in the hospital room, I lay down and secretly shed tears. I had never felt such pain in my life before. Then, as if by fate, my husband came to visit. I have something important to discuss today. Important? I braced myself. Ethan's words lingered in my mind, making me fear that Steve might bring up divorce. However, what he said next completely took me by surprise. Actually, I've been thinking about buying a new house. Our current one isn't wheelchair accessible, and I know it's been tough for you, right? That might be true, but to go to such lengths for me. It's okay. Of course, there was something that worried me. It was about Ethan. But what will Ethan say? I mentioned it to him, but he seemed disinterested. We hardly talk these days. I see. During my hospital stay, Steve had been looking for a new house. It was true that our old home was inconvenient now that I was in a wheelchair. Building a new house would have taken too much time. By the time Steve visited me 2 weeks later, he had already purchased a house. I've already bought the house. Already? Found a great model house in a nice location. I decided on the spot. All this for me. I just want you to live as comfortably as possible. Thank you so much. A surge of emotions welled up inside me. Upon being discharged and arriving at our new home, I was amazed. It was more magnificent than I had imagined. Nice house, isn't it? Yes, it's wonderful. And this house even has a basement. A basement too. But there was more to be surprised about. Oh right, there was something else. Saying that, Steve went to the back of the room and returned. Could it be? Yes, this is an electric wheelchair. Oh my God. With this, you can move around more freely, right? I can't thank you enough. I did this on my own initiative. I hoped this would lessen the burden on my husband. Though I wouldn't suddenly be able to do everything. I was determined to try and even go outside. From that day on, I started doing things for myself. Ethan seemed displeased to see me becoming more active. Move out of the way. You're such a nuisance. Then, he kicked my wheelchair. That's dangerous. Don't be here if you can't do anything. I was just trying to lessen the burden. As if that changes anything. You don't have to be so cruel. Your existence itself is a burden, so what's the point? I tried to return to my room, but he blocked my way. Where do you think you're going? Just back to my room. Move out of the way. We're not done talking. I have nothing more to say. I had hoped for a relationship improvement, but perhaps this was the end. I had reached my limit. Running away? Think what you want. It's fine by me. Why did Dad even marry someone like you? Then, he kicked my wheelchair again and returned to his room upstairs. For a while, he stopped talking to me. This silence was somewhat a relief. Sorry, but I've got another business trip. Understood. I'm sorry, especially since we haven't resolved things with Ethan. It's okay. I'll call if anything happens. As Steve left for his trip, life with Ethan resumed. With Steve gone, Ethan often stayed out. Now, I found myself anxious about when he would return. However, Ethan didn't come home until after I had gone to bed that night. The next morning, I woke to loud noises coming from upstairs. It seemed he had returned while I was asleep, but there was no sign of him leaving his room. Well, time to get to work today. I was determined. After becoming disabled, I thought I'd have to quit my job. But I was recognized for my previous work and told I could continue working remotely. I turned on my computer to start working and realized something was missing, the mouse. Where did I put it? I remembered that computer peripherals were stored in the basement. Given my son's current attitude, asking him for help seemed futile, so I decided to go myself. The electric wheelchair really does make things easier. Though reluctant, I didn't want to postpone it and headed to the basement. The access was through a door behind the staircase. Slowly descending the ramp, I reached for a box in the back. As I placed the box on my lap to return upstairs, I heard someone coming down the stairs. Thinking Ethan had finally woken up, I saw him coming down the ramp. "What are you doing down here?" "Just looking for something." A part of me felt a little happy, thinking he came to help. "Then, I'll help you." Saying that, he closed the door. Shocked, I froze for a moment but quickly realized this was bad. Not only was I trapped, but it was also freezing. Checking the wall-mounted thermometer, it read 28 degrees. "What are you doing?" "Open up." "Huh? Why don't you stay down here for a while?" No matter how much I tried, the basement door wouldn't budge. Having been in an accident, I was using an electric wheelchair, making any movement difficult. "It's cold." "Well, of course. It's 28 degrees right now. Why are you doing this?" Then, Ethan started laughing loudly. "I've been irritated by you for a long time." "What?" "Pretending to be a mother. You might as well become a mummy staying in a place like this, right?" "What are you thinking? We're going on a trip for 3 nights and 4 days. So, try your best until we get back. Please, let me out." "All right." After waiting for a while, Ethan came back with something in his hand. The door cracked open slightly, and through the gap, he threw in 2 bags of snacks and a bottle of water. "You expect me to survive on this? That should be more than enough." "Well, this is. Goodbye. For now. Just open it." My cries of anguish didn't reach my son. All I could hear were his footsteps fading away. I was left with no choice but to despair. It seemed he wasn't seriously intending to endanger my life. I had to figure out how to survive the next 4 days. I need to find a way to stay warm. I desperately searched for anything useful. After rummaging through cardboard boxes, I found an old blanket. With nothing else available, I covered myself with it to withstand the cold. Without any means to call for help, the 4 days passed, and Ethan returned from his trip. A grand act of revenge was about to begin. I secretly watched Ethan's movements. "Now, what will you do?" As Ethan headed towards the basement and cautiously opened the door. "What is this?" The stench was so strong, it could be detected from afar. In a panic, he entered. "You've got to be kidding. She died." I shouldn't have listened to them. At the back of the basement was something wrapped in a blanket. Ethan probably thought it was me. However, it was a trap set by me and another person. "What are you doing there?" Ethan quickly turned around. "Why are you here?" "Why?" "What do you mean why?" "Don't mess with me. That's my line. You shouldn't do such things without being prepared for the consequences." "What? Are you mocking me?" Just as Ethan approached me. I never thought it would come to this. "Dad, why are you here?" "You were supposed to be on a business trip. I came back because I couldn't get in touch. Then I found out she was trapped in the basement. Indeed, I was rescued by my husband's efforts. It was just yesterday that I was freed from the basement." To deceive Ethan, my husband and I placed kitchen waste in a bag to mimic the appearance of decay, and used a blanket to resemble me. The plan was a complete success. "So, who is this person you mentioned?" "Huh? Did I say something like that?" "Don't play dumb. I really don't know what you're talking about." That's when I had a realization. Could it be Rebecca? Ethan stepped back. It was clear I had hit the nail on the head. "You did mention coming out of the piano school before, right?" "Yes." "They must have been sneaking around behind our backs." "Then let's verify it." "Huh? You know her contact information, right?" Let's invite her over. Wait a minute. Just call her. Ethan contacted Rebecca. Soon after, the doorbell rang. Ethan went to greet her, and they both headed to the basement together. Now, let's hear the explanation. It was natural for me not to meet my eyes in such an awkward situation. I just wanted Dad to be happy. What's so good about her? You really don't understand anything. What do you mean? I chose Kim because she accepted me for who I am. But Rebecca would be no different, right? Then why go through all this? You think I'd fall for someone like that? I thought we should hear it straight from her. Wait. Since she's here, let's ask Rebecca. She was taken aback, clearly not expecting to be the focus. All eyes were on her. I was using Ethan. I only said to scare her a bit. I never thought it would lead to locking her in a basement. I had heard some things about Rebecca when Ethan was attending piano lessons. It seems she had been inviting him out for meals several times even before I met him. Despite his rejections. After we got married, he started to refuse rides to and from the lessons. That's why I decided to drive him, partly to keep an eye on him. Indeed, I was using Ethan. But I never wanted to be with him. What? I just couldn't stand seeing the person I liked happy. So, you saying you wanted to be with Dad was? I'm sorry. That was a lie. Then, I remembered something I had looked into before. It wouldn't have worked out anyway. What do you mean? Because Rebecca is married. That's a lie. Is that right? Rebecca nodded silently. Ethan couldn't have known. Rebecca's husband was also working away from home. Then, what was all this for? Seeing Ethan's dejected figure, I whispered something to my husband. I see. That makes sense. What are you talking about? You liked Rebecca, didn't you? What? Ethan looked up quickly after initially looking down. No, that's not it. Thinking about it, there were many odd things. You said it was for my sake, but there were other ways to handle this. Rebecca, you knew about Ethan's feelings, right? Yes. It's such a pity. You were just used for revenge. After all this time, I was doing it for Rebecca. Ethan eventually sat down, overwhelmed. Steve placed a hand on his shoulder, and Ethan's expression seemed to soften a bit. Perhaps he was hoping for some sympathy. We, as parents, had decided to be strict with our son for his own good. It's regrettable, but you're an adult. Being deceived doesn't excuse your actions. So, leave this house immediately. Wait. Isn't that too harsh? Harsh? Consider what you've done before saying that. For someone like her. I had no intention of holding back either. What you did to me could be considered kidnapping. There was a risk to my life. That's why you panicked, right? Cam is right. Do you think we can live with someone dangerous like that? Ethan might have thought it was a minor act, but it was a serious crime. It was a sufficient reason to kick him out. Then let's give him a choice. Either we call the police now, or he leaves this house. That's a good idea. So, what's it going to be? Giving Ethan a choice was deliberate, but he never really had an option. I understand. I'll leave. All right. I will still pay for your tuition until you graduate. You'll have to figure out the rest on your own. And don't ever come back to this house. Isn't that a bit too much? Would you prefer to be reported? Hearing that, Ethan looked down and fell silent again. Rebecca. What should I do now? He was seeking help from Rebecca. But her demeanor was no longer quiet, anger towards Ethan was palpable. You really screwed things up. Who asked you to go this far? I never thought you were this foolish. But, I just did what you said. Did what I said? I never told you to commit a crime. What's that supposed to mean? You deceived me first. A pointless argument unfolded before us. If you want to fight, do it outside. It's just a nuisance here. Exactly. If you two continue to cause a disturbance, I'll really call the police. With my intervention, the two of them regained some composure and left the house. Continuing their argument. Part of me wondered if kicking Ethan out was too harsh. But what Ethan did to me was a crime. He needs to understand the gravity of his actions and live a righteous life. This was the right thing to do, wasn't it? Yes. You don't need to worry about it, Kim. But still. It's okay. If we coddle him, he'll never truly grow up. You're right. After leaving the house, my son started living alone in an apartment. As my husband had promised, we continued to pay for his tuition. But he was earning his living expenses on his own. Apparently, one part-time job wasn't enough, so he seems to be juggling several jobs. There was one time when he called me. I'm sorry for everything. Could you lend me some money? Why should I do that? You chose to leave this home. So, it's like that, huh? What are you talking about? It's always been about Dad, not me, right? If that's how you feel, don't bother calling me again. Like I'd ever contact you again. He hung up. Ethan was turning 20 this year, missing out on what should be the best time of his life. He must accept the consequences of his actions as his punishment. Rebecca moved away quietly, and now her whereabouts are unknown. Finally, things have settled down. Yes. Let's look forward to our future together. Thus, life for just the two of us began, and surely, happiness will continue to follow. I will raise this child by myself. I tell Ben with strong determination. However, Ben just laughs it off. Go ahead, do as you like. Olivia is not an object. Yet, I could only feel disgust towards Ben, who treated her so lightly. Talking to Ben any further would just be a waste of time. Well, I have to go to my beloved Isabella. You two take care of each other. Even if you both collapse, I'm a stranger now. Don't you dare rely on me. Saying that, Ben left the house. Some days later. Is Olivia here? Ben comes back, looking desperate. He probably learned some secrets about Olivia. How dare you show your face now? I look at Ben with contempt. Shut up. You keeping quiet about it is cowardly too. Olivia, let's live with your real father. Weren't you bullied by your stepmother? Ben looks at Olivia and keeps talking to her. The next moment, Olivia looks down on him and says, Who are you? I am Nicole Thompson. This year I turned 45. I currently live with my husband, Ben, who is the same age, and our daughter Olivia. Ben was a classmate from middle school. Back then, Ben was mischievous and I was quiet. We hardly had any interactions. Ben often skipped classes, and when he was in class, he was always sleeping. He seemed quite the troublemaker. However, Ben had his good sides. He valued friendships. Ben got along with everyone, regardless of gender. It seemed like he cared a lot about his friends, and he was always willing to help a friend in need. I watched Ben from afar. We never became particularly close, and just like that, we graduated from middle school. Ben and I went to different high schools. We met again at a middle school reunion. Being in my 40s, I was curious about what kind of adults everyone had become. It might be a chance to reminisce about old times. Wanting to see my classmates and friends after so long, I decided to attend the reunion. That's where I ended up sitting next to Ben. Could it be Nicole? It's been so long. Ben talked to me in a friendly manner. I was plain looking back then, so I didn't stand out much. I was surprised that Ben remembered me. But, strangely, I didn't feel bad about it. You've changed, Ben. I couldn't recognize you. Ben used to dress like a delinquent in middle school. But now, Ben's hair was short, and his clothes were fresh. He barely resembled his old self. From there, Ben and I hit it off. And we exchanged contact information when the reunion was wrapping up. After that, we started seeing each other regularly. Eventually, we began dating and started thinking about marriage. It seemed Ben felt the same way, and one day he proposed. "I want you to marry me." I couldn't think of marrying anyone but Ben, so I accepted his proposal. At that moment, seeing Ben so happy made me smile too. We decided to just register our marriage, considering our age. We decided not to have a wedding ceremony or a honeymoon. After registering our marriage, Ben informed me that he was actually divorced and had a daughter. I was surprised, but it was already after we had registered. It wasn't possible to undo the marriage now, and at our age. Having my own children would be difficult. I decided to look at it positively, thinking that I could experience parenting, which I had given up on. Fortunately, my new daughter, Olivia, turned out to be a very good girl. I believed that the three of us would get along well. However, that belief was quickly betrayed. After getting married, Ben's mischievousness from his middle school days returned. Perhaps he had just been hiding it while we were dating. Right after we got married, Ben and Olivia moved into the house I lived in. I had bought a detached house, worried about my old age. At the time, Ben and Olivia were living in an apartment. It was more cost-effective for them to move into my house to save on rent. So, I asked Ben and Olivia to cancel their apartment lease and move in with me. Fortunately, we had several spare rooms. Ben seemed happy about saving on rent and agreed to move in. For a while, everything was peaceful. Ben worked as a carpenter, so he often came home late. Since I could work from home and had a flexible schedule, I often took care of Olivia. I also took care of taking her to and from daycare. In the beginning, Ben was grateful for my help. I always feel bad for being so busy. To make it up to you, let's go out for a meal on Sunday. It's on me. Ben would say this every time he came home late from overtime. However, this consideration changed after living together for just 6 months. "I'm going out drinking with colleagues tonight. Don't wait up for dinner." Ben would send such messages, and then he wouldn't come back until the morning. We were still newlyweds. I thought this was incredibly rude. So, I decided to confront Ben in the morning. However, as soon as he got home, he locked himself in his room, making it impossible to have a conversation. "I have a hangover, so please leave me alone. I'm taking the day off from work." Whenever things went wrong, Ben always did this. He would complain about feeling unwell, making it difficult for me to push back. Okay. I had no choice but to agree. But my worries weren't just about Ben. I was also concerned about Olivia. Olivia had a weak constitution and frequently ran a fever. She coughed a lot and often seemed unwell. I frequently received calls from the daycare asking me to pick her up because she was sick. Having no experience with child rearing, I had nothing to compare this to. But I was worried that this was happening too often. Concerned, I decided to talk to Ben about Olivia's health before he went to work in the morning. "It's about Olivia. She's had a fever 5 times this month already. Don't you think that's too much?" It was clear that the number of times she was getting sick was unusually high. Then, Ben replied with a frown. "I don't know what you want me to do about it. Getting sick is somewhat inevitable with kids in daycare, isn't it?" But still, I was perplexed. Then, Ben seemed to have an idea. Maybe Olivia is just not used to the new environment. Nicole, you're a mother now. Try giving her more nutritious food and take better care of her. What? I was stunned by Ben's suggestion. It was as if he was saying I wasn't feeding Olivia properly. Before I could respond, Ben dismissively said, "Anyway, I'm busy. You'll have to handle it, Nicole." Then, Ben left for work. But you're her biological father. Doesn't he care about Olivia? The thought crossed my mind for a moment, but my concern for Olivia was paramount. I bought a cookbook and started making meals with higher nutritional value. However, despite my efforts, something unexpected happened one evening. I was preparing dinner in the kitchen when I noticed I couldn't hear Olivia, who should have been in the living room. Normally, she would be watching TV and singing happily. Olivia? What's wrong? I went to check on her in the living room and froze. Olivia had collapsed, her face contorted in pain. Olivia. Are you okay? I rushed to her side, but she didn't respond. I immediately called an ambulance. At the hospital, I was faced with an unexpected reality. Pediatric cancer? Yes. We'll need to discuss the treatment plan going forward. The doctor explained the situation in a calm manner, which helped me stay composed. We decided to perform more detailed examinations the next day to determine the treatment plan. It was Sunday, and the specialist wasn't available. Mommy. Can we go home today? Olivia was anxious after waking up in the hospital. Yes, of course, honey. We'll go home together. I answered Olivia with a smile. Even though it was Sunday, Ben wasn't at home. Because today, like many others, Ben is out drinking with friends. He was happily looking up bars on his smartphone yesterday. Ben left the house before noon, and it's uncertain if he will return today. The only option I have is to talk to Ben properly. Olivia's illness is serious, and it's necessary for Ben to understand that. However, Ben has recently been neglecting to take care of Olivia. Honestly, I'm not even sure if he has any affection for her. So, it's uncertain how Ben will react. I'm so anxious about his reactions. I sighed quietly to myself. But that day, Ben did not return home. Nor did he come back the following morning. Olivia, let's go. With no other choice. I took Olivia with me to the hospital where she had been taken by ambulance the day before. We underwent various tests, including blood tests, first thing in the morning. We were told the results would come later, so Olivia and I returned home, somewhat tired. To my surprise, Ben was at home, drunk. Hey, welcome back. He was in a good mood, drinking beer from a can. I felt angry at his attitude. It's insensitive, considering Olivia is going through such a difficult time. I wished he would show more awareness as a father. Why didn't you come home yesterday? And what about work today? My voice naturally lowered. But Ben just laughed happily. Last night was so fun. I just got back a bit ago and decided to take the day off, he said, taking another swig of his beer. Glancing at Olivia, I saw her looking sad. Any child would feel this way, knowing their own illness and seeing their father in such a state. Clenching my fist, I yelled at Ben. Enough. Do you even realize Olivia has pediatric cancer? We are facing a tough situation. Do you even have any sense of responsibility as a father? I glared at Ben as I said this. Ben looked dumbfounded upon hearing my words. Is it true that Olivia has pediatric cancer? Then he turned to Olivia, who nodded silently, her face pale. No way. This is such a hassle. I can't afford hospital bills or anything like that. He sighed heavily. I was appalled. To react this way and show such an attitude upon learning his own daughter is sick. This is the epitome of a father's failure. Disgusted and at a loss for words, Ben then made a shocking declaration. I hate dealing with troublesome stuff. Maybe it's time to call it quits. What do you mean? What does he mean by, it's time? A question mark pops up in my head. Then, the next moment, Ben made an outrageous statement. I actually have someone else I like. So, I'm thinking this might be a good opportunity to marry her instead. Olivia is in the way, so Nicole, you take her and raise her. You've got some maternal feelings, right? What? Olivia is sick. And you're not even going to try to support her as her father? My anger towards Ben's words increased. Olivia whispered, Dad's the worst. Clearly upset. It's unimaginable that these words are about his own daughter. However, Ben didn't seem to care about our reactions. Let's get divorced. I even have the divorce papers ready. He pulled out a crumpled divorce paper from his bag, likely having planned to remarry someone else all along. Otherwise, why would he have a divorce paper ready? Ben said with a smirk, of course, you'll get Olivia's custody. I can't deal with a sick child. He was truly finished as a father. Olivia looked anxious at his words. Mommy. She clung to me, looking terrified. Seeing Olivia like this, I made up my mind. I couldn't leave her with such a despicable person as Ben, whether she was my biological child or not. I love Olivia. So, I resolved. I will raise her by myself. I told Ben with determination. However, Ben just laughed it off. Ben said, go ahead, do as you like. Olivia is not an object. Yet, I could only feel disgust towards Ben who treated her so lightly. Talking to Ben any further would just be a waste of time. Well, I have to go to my beloved Isabella. You two take care of each other. Even if you both collapse, I'm a stranger now. Don't you dare rely on me. Ben said this, abandoned Olivia, and left the house. This is so frustrating. I shed a tear. Ben showed no awareness as a father until the very end. With such a father, Olivia would never be happy. I looked at Olivia. She smiled sadly. I'll be okay. Don't worry about me, Mommy. I'm really sorry for causing so much trouble. She whispered so, with a hint of hesitation. You're not a bother at all. Forcing a child as young as 6 to say such things, Ben truly is the lowest of the low. My heart tightened with pain. So, I hugged Olivia and quietly told her. It's okay. I'll make sure your father regrets abandoning such a cute child like you. It's unforgivable. Olivia was trembling slightly. Mommy, thank you. Tears overflowed from her eyes. Days later, Olivia and I were happily living together. Fortunately, she didn't need to be hospitalized and outpatient visits were sufficient. I couldn't forgive Ben, but the time spent with Olivia was healing. We made the most of it, baking sweets together and cherishing our time as a duo. During such moments. Is Olivia here? Ben comes back, looking desperate. He probably learned some secrets about Olivia. How dare you show your face now? I look at Ben with contempt. Shut up. You keeping quiet about it is cowardly too. Olivia, let's live with your real father. Weren't you bullied by your stepmother? Ben kept talking to Olivia, looking concerned, but that was likely just an act of his. After such horrible behavior, it's hard to believe he had a change of heart. Then, Olivia looked down on him and said, Who are you? Huh? Olivia, what are you talking about? I'm your only father, aren't I? Did Nicole say something to you? Ben seemed incredulous. Then Olivia countered, My family is only Mommy. I don't have a dad. She glared at Ben. Ben, thoroughly rejected by Olivia, looked at me desperately. Nicole, we haven't submitted the divorce papers yet, right? We're still married, and Olivia is my child. Right? There was a hint of hope in Ben's eyes. I had to confront him with reality. I submitted the divorce papers long ago. What are you even talking about now? Days had passed since Ben left the house. Ben's face fell with despair. You act too fast. He was stunned. However, Ben then said, I found out about Olivia's insurance. You're just noticing now. I whispered quietly. Olivia's secret. It was that she was covered by a large insurance policy. Actually, I work in sales at a life insurance company. So, I fully understand the importance of life insurance more than anyone. I have a large insurance policy on myself, covering critical illness, disability, care needs, and more. Of course, I'm also enrolled in pension and lump sum payment plans. And that applies to Olivia as well. Right after marrying Ben and becoming a family with Olivia, I enrolled her in several insurance policies. I only told Ben that I was getting insurance for Olivia. You're covering the insurance premiums, right? Then do whatever you like. Ben said so. He seemed uninterested at the time and never asked anything about it afterward. Probably he had forgotten all about it until now. But I used all my knowledge to enroll Olivia in the best possible insurance. Why he is suddenly so interested now is beyond me. I found that curious. So, I asked Ben, why are you suddenly interested in Olivia's insurance? You seemed uninterested when we talked about it. I thought you had forgotten. Then Ben revealed something shocking. I was curious if there was a letter for me. I went to the house during the day and ended up stealing all the letters from the post box. From what I heard, it seemed Ben had come to the house on his own and stolen letters from the mailbox. I found a letter from the life insurance company and couldn't help but open it. It was a confirmation of Olivia's insurance coverage. You really put a lot of insurance on Olivia, Ben said, smirking. I couldn't believe he would open my mail without permission. I was too dumbfounded to respond. Then, grinning, Ben asked, how much did you get from the insurance because Olivia got cancer? You enrolled in medical insurance, right? It must have been written in the letter. Ben was aggressively curious. His greed for money was disappointing. Moreover, despite Olivia's illness, he hadn't shown any concern for her. I felt no obligation to inform such a person kindly. So, I decided to play dumb with Ben. Who knows? What are you going to do with that information now? We're already divorced. You won't get a penny of the insurance money, you know? Ben looked frustrated. That's because you kept quiet. Why he thought he was entitled to the insurance money was beyond me. I decided to confront him with reality. First off, I'm the policyholder for Olivia's insurance. I'm the one paying the premiums. What makes you think you have any rights when you've done nothing, Ben? Then, Ben said with a guilty look, I'll remarry you. If we're married, the insurance money becomes joint property, right? It seems Ben finally realized he was at a disadvantage. That makes sense, given that Ben hasn't paid a single penny towards Olivia's insurance. Even selfish Ben must have realized he couldn't claim any rights. I firmly stated, no, thank you. Weren't you going to remarry Isabella? I have no intention of remarrying you. Who would remarry such a person? I rejected him completely. Then, Ben pleaded with me. The remarriage fell through. The marriage with Isabella is off, Ben said, collapsing in defeat. What? You left so confidently before. What happened? I couldn't help but ask Ben. Olivia looked surprised too. After all, Ben had left saying he was going to remarry Isabella. What could have changed that suddenly? Olivia looked puzzled. Then, Ben started to explain sheepishly. Actually, I moved in with Isabella, but after lazing around together, I lost my job, and Isabella dumped me. I see. I could only be appalled at Ben. Turns out, Isabella wanted to be a housewife. She said, "I don't need a man without money," and kicked me out. Ben scratched his cheek, embarrassed. Even so, I had no intention of reconciling with Ben. Just because you were dumped by your affair doesn't mean you can come back. I'm not remarrying you. And you have no rights to Olivia's insurance. Don't say that. Please, I'm begging you. Ben desperately begged me. But my stance remained unchanged. I've decided to live with Olivia. You should start a new life too. I replied coldly. Then, Ben grumbled. I was planning to go to Isabella with Olivia's insurance money. If I had the money, maybe we could get back together. Just give me the money already. So that's your true intention. I was taken aback by Ben's true colors. His spirit of only targeting the insurance money he hadn't paid for was astonishing. I felt even more outraged. All you talk about is money. What were you planning to do with Olivia if you got her back? Were you planning to take care of her properly? If Ben had planned to dedicate himself to Olivia's care, maybe there could have been some redemption for him as a father. I waited for Ben's answer. But Ben's response was utterly selfish. What? Of course, I wouldn't bother with that. Once I got the insurance money, I'd just put her in a facility. If it's attached to a hospital, they'd probably take her in, right? He said this as if it was the most natural thing. You're the worst. I was speechless. Ben showed no sign of fatherly concern. He probably isn't worried about Olivia. He was only interested in money. You're just after the money, aren't you? And you call yourself a father? I'm appalled. Besides, the beneficiary of the insurance is designated. Even if you got custody, it would mean nothing. What do you mean? I explained with a sigh. Ben thought that having custody meant he could receive the insurance money. However, beneficiaries are usually designated when the policy is signed. So, Ben had no right to receive the insurance money. Ben was in despair. What am I supposed to do now? No job, no woman, no place to live. Ben looked hopeless. That's not my problem. Find a job somewhere else. It's all the result of your own actions. This was entirely Ben's fault. If he had been serious about his work, he wouldn't have been fired. It was a clear case of reaping what he sowed. However, Ben had no intention of working. Cornered, Ben suddenly had an idea and looked at me. Right. I can be a security guard at your house. It's careless for women to live alone, right? Plus, it's safer to live with someone you know, isn't it? Ben said this, expecting me to agree. Seeing my silence, he took it as affirmation. In exchange for my security services, you can give me some of the insurance money, right? Ben winked. I was almost impressed by his audacity. Olivia was looking at Ben in disbelief. A father who makes his daughter look at him that way must be unique to Ben. It seemed I needed to make things clear to him. I smiled warmly, and Ben relaxed into a smile too. Then, I shouted. Absolutely not. I will take care of Olivia myself. I have no intention of reconciling with you. Never show up in front of me again. No way. Ben made a shocked face. You were the one who said, even if we collapse, I'm a stranger now. Don't you dare rely on me. I'm just returning those words back to you. Those words were unforgettable to me. It seemed Ben had given up trying to persuade me after my declaration. Then, he turned to Olivia and spoke to her in a coaxing tone. Olivia, you want to live with your real dad, right? You don't want this fake mom who's a stranger, do you? Ben. At this point, Ben tried to cling to Olivia, probably thinking that if he could persuade Olivia, I would follow. I was just appalled by how Ben always relied on others. I glanced at Olivia. She looked angrier than I had ever seen her before. Being selfishly dragged around by Ben had clearly angered Olivia. Taking a deep breath, Olivia shouted, "You're not my dad. I hate you. I only have mommy. Don't ever show up again." Olivia said this and hugged me. Olivia. I was deeply moved by Olivia's words. Then, looking frustrated, Ben said, "Fine. Don't come crying to me later." He said this and was about to leave, but I called out to him. Ben. Ben turned back and asked, "What? Changed your mind about getting back together?" He seemed to assume I would agree, looking utterly confident. However, I was about to drop him into despair. Smiling sweetly, I told Ben, "We may have divorced, but I'll be suing for compensation for your affair. Of course, that includes Isabella too. I'll make sure you regret neglecting Olivia." Ben's face turned pale. "I don't have money. I don't even have a place to live anymore, and I've quit my job," he mumbled to himself. I looked at Ben with a smirk. "Such a pity, huh? Thought you were going to get a large insurance payout. But now you have to pay out instead. What a pitiful man. Don't mess with me," Ben shouted in frustration. He sounded like a sore loser. "If you show up in front of us again, I'll call the police. Be prepared." I smiled sweetly at Ben, and perhaps intimidated by my smile, he just replied with a yes and hastily retreated. After that incident, Ben disappeared. I hired a lawyer to sue Ben and Isabella for compensation. Isabella initially resisted paying the compensation, but after being persuaded by the lawyer, she eventually agreed to pay the standard rate. "If you're not satisfied, we can take this to court. But it might get out to your company, you know." I think that played a significant role in her decision. I heard that Isabella broke up with Ben and remained single. Isabella, who planned to live off a man by taking Ben away. But in the end, she was left with only the compensation payment after breaking up with Ben. It must have been a regrettable outcome for Isabella as well. And Ben ended up in a more tragic situation. He lost his job and a place to live, resulting in a complete loss of income. Ben must have felt cornered mentally. He began appearing in front of me and Olivia frequently. He looked disheveled and even smelled a bit. I feared he might do something drastic. It wouldn't be good for Olivia's emotional well-being. Therefore, I consulted the police and obtained a restraining order against him. When Ben ambushed us once, the police happened to pass by and gave him a stern warning. "I'm so sorry." He fled the scene as if escaping. After that, we didn't see Ben anymore. He must be living in fear of the police now. Interestingly, the compensation was paid up front by Ben's parents. They apologized to us repeatedly. Since I, who have no blood relation to Olivia, ended up raising her, they probably felt extra guilty. They also provided child support in addition. Moreover, Ben's parents intend to sever their parental ties with him in exchange for covering these expenses. Particularly, Ben's father was very angry, declaring, "Ben will never cross our threshold again. Even if there's an inheritance, he'll never see a dime of it." Ben's mother, tearfully denouncing him. "He's truly disgraceful. Ben is no longer my son." Saying so, she demonstrated a firm stance of refusal. With that attitude, it's unlikely Ben could rely on his parents anymore. I also informed our middle school classmates about Ben's situation. It was to ensure Ben lost all possible support. Ben always valued his friendships, especially those from middle school. Even while we were dating, he often said, "My friends from middle school are very important to me. It's a lifelong friendship." He kept in touch with them regularly. Being cut off by friends would be the most painful for him. Since most classmates are reasonable people, they are unlikely to support Ben. I truly think it serves him right. Now, Ben has no one left to rely on. With no job or support, Ben's future looks bleak. Since then, I've been taking Olivia to the hospital regularly for her treatment. Fortunately, her pediatric cancer was detected early, and there's a high chance of a complete recovery. Sorry, Mommy. Although Olivia always seems apologetic, I love her, so it's not a problem for me. I always respond, "It's okay. Let's work hard together and get you better soon." Her treatment has just begun. There will be various challenges ahead. But as long as I'm with Olivia, I'm confident we can overcome them. To become a true mother to Olivia, I will keep striving today.
Hey, let us in.
What are you thinking?
Right now, making noise in front of my house are my husband, Rob, and my sister-in-law, Jocelyn, and her husband. Why do they automatically assume they're not to blame? I am Mandy, 28 years old. I was living with my husband, Rob, and our 1-year-old daughter. Rob and I met through a mutual friend. We both liked driving and traveling, which made us get along well and start dating. It was fun being around Rob because I could be completely genuine. When he proposed, I had no reason to refuse, and I thought I could have a happy marriage with him. However, after getting married, there was something that slightly bothered me. Both of us liked to travel and go out, so we continued to do so even after getting married. I used to hear my friends complain, "After getting married, my husband just stays home playing games and we go out less." So I thought it was good that Rob was different. But Rob's sister Jocelyn and her family often tagged along on these outings. It happened about once every 2 or 3 times, and for some reason we ended up paying for their transportation and entrance fees to places like theme parks. Jocelyn and her husband didn't even bother showing gratitude or paying us back. They acted like it was our responsibility to pay. At this stage, while I wasn't exactly displeased, I found the situation odd and asked Rob about it. It turned out that Jocelyn's husband had failed in an investment before and was in debt. They've got 3 kids and are going through a tough time financially. But they didn't want the kids to struggle with money, so Jocelyn was relying on her little brother Rob.
We don't have kids yet, and both of us work and can afford it. It's important to help each other out because we're family.
Hearing his reasons, I thought it was Jocelyn and her husband's faults, but I also felt reassured that Rob would cherish our family even when we had kids. Apart from the money issue, Jocelyn was kind, cheerful, and fun to be around. As an only child, it felt like having a real sister and brother, which was nice. Eventually, Rob and I had a child. We wanted 2 to 3 kids, so we discussed buying a house that would accommodate our future plans. We debated between building a house and buying a condo, but settled on a new condo as we both preferred that. At this time, we also decided to buy a bigger car, thinking about the future. When deciding on the condo and car, Rob didn't have strong preferences and said,
Mandy, you can decide whatever you think is best.
However, he insisted that we choose a location near Jocelyn's family's place.
The closer we are, the easier it is to help each other out,
he said. Since it was my first time raising a child, I agreed, thinking it would be helpful to have Jocelyn's family nearby for advice and support. As a result, our condo and Jocelyn's apartment were just a 5-minute walk apart. At first, as Rob said, Jocelyn's family helped us out. Their advice on parenting was incredibly valuable and greatly appreciated, even though they didn't give us any presents or gifts to celebrate the birth of our child. However, over time, the frequency of Jocelyn's family visits to our house increased, from about once a week to 2 to 3 times, and at times even 5 times a week. And while Jocelyn initially helped with housework and childcare, gradually she stopped helping at all. I had to cook for Jocelyn's family and take care of her 3 kids. Before I knew it, it was like we were a family of 8, with 5 from Jocelyn's family and 3 from ours. They always say things like, "It's nice to have a spacious house," and
"A new condo is the best."
And then they just stay at our place forever. I couldn't bring myself to say, "Please go home soon." When it comes to Rob, whenever Jocelyn and her family try to leave, he would say,
"Why don't you stay longer?"
They often used the room we were planning to turn into a nursery for overnight stays. Of course, Jocelyn and her family never contributed to the groceries or living expenses. If it was just a visit once or twice a week, it wouldn't have been a problem, but with Jocelyn's family coming over for dinner and even taking baths, the cost of groceries and utilities was much higher than for just 3 people. Moreover, the car we bought for our family was used more by Jocelyn's family on weekends. Whether it was for a little trip or shopping, there were many times when I wanted to use the car with my child, but Jocelyn and her family were using it. Additionally, Rob started to join them on these trips more often. I found myself and my child left at home alone on weekends. This situation felt wrong, so I complained to Rob. At first, Rob was gentle, saying,
"My sister's family is having a tough time. Let's help them out, please."
But eventually he started yelling,
"Who do you think you are, refusing to help when our family is in trouble?"
Then, after about a year of this going on, a decisive event happened. I was suddenly called into the living room where Rob and Jocelyn and her husband began to speak formally.
"After discussing it, we've decided to sell this house and the car to my sister's family."
I was speechless, unable to comprehend what Rob was saying. Rob continued without a pause.
"After all, my sister's family has 5 people, so they need a spacious house, right? We only have 1 child and are thinking maybe just 1 is enough, so we don't need such a big house or car. It's better to let those who need them use them. We can just move to a smaller rental apartment. I'll probably spend most of my time here anyway, so you and the child can stay in the new place."
That's when I snapped back to reality. Wait a minute, are you saying you just want me and the child to leave? I can't see how that could be considered a reasonable request. Then Jocelyn began to speak. "I heard from Rob that you always speak ill of us, trying to keep us from coming over. Wow, you're such a mean girl, huh? Why weren't you brought up to appreciate family? And now to refuse to leave the house? What a selfish woman!" I responded, "Excuse me, but this house and that car belongs to us, my husband and me. It doesn't make sense to just hand them over because someone says so." "Who said anything about just handing them over? Are you stupid? We're talking about selling them. Of course, we'll give you a family price, and you say it belongs to you guys, but if your husband says it's okay, then it's settled." Jocelyn just said it like it was no big deal. However, when I mentioned, "By the way, the mortgage for the house and car loan together is about $3,000 a month. Can you pay that? Plus, you have debts, right? Even if we change the loan name, you probably won't pass the credit check." Jocelyn and her husband's faces turned pale. Jocelyn asked Rob questions aggressively. "Rob, you said the total loans for the house and car were around $1,000, didn't you? What's going on?" Rob, visibly shaken, stuttered.
$3,000?
Rob, who had left all contract negotiations and household management to me, was unaware of these details. I continued, "If you think I'm lying, I don't mind showing you the statements." Jocelyn pressed Rob. "You're telling me a different story. You said it would be about $1,000 a month, and you could pay half, and we'd only have to pay $500. I was shocked by Rob's thoughtless promises. Then Rob said,
"Then we'll pay $2,500, and my sister's family can just pay $500.
"What are you even talking about?" I was dumbfounded, but Rob continued.
"If you, Mandy, and our child move to an apartment that costs $500 in rent, our expenses would be the same. So we just continue paying $3,000 for this house, the car, and the new apartment rent."
"Oh, that's a good idea. Let's do that."
I told them, That's just ridiculous. Telling us to sell to you, but only paying $500 and expecting us to leave? Normally, you'd either pay the remaining amount yourselves or give up on buying. But Rob kept insisting.
Don't you want to help the family?
However, I couldn't possibly accept such absurd conditions. That day, negotiations fell through, and Jocelyn and her family left. After this discussion, Rob continued to ignore both me and our child. Despite this, Jocelyn's family kept coming to our house as if it were their own. Even though Rob and I hadn't resolved our conversation, a week later, Jocelyn's family's belongings arrived at our house, and they moved in without permission. I protested, but they wouldn't listen. Jocelyn's family didn't have many things, so they moved their belongings into the room we planned for a child and other available spaces in the living room, fully making themselves at home. It seems they decided to gradually take over the house since I opposed them anyway. Jocelyn's family had already canceled their previous apartment lease. Later, Rob forced me to change the car's registration to his name. He said,
"You've always been nagging about using the car on weekends. Don't complain anymore,"
with a smug look. However, it seems Rob tried to change the house's ownership to his name without my consent, but everywhere he went, he was told it was impossible without my agreement, so he gave up. It seems he preferred the idea of leaving the mortgage under my name since I would have to pay for it, which he found convenient. I was furious, but had a plan in mind, so I decided to keep quiet for a while. Jocelyn kept telling me to get out soon, but I responded, "I'm currently looking for a good property with a real estate agent, so please wait a bit longer," postponing the issue. During this time, I was treated like a servant in my own home, feeling out of place but endured it. Then, the opportunity came. One weekend, Jocelyn's family and Rob planned a trip. They hadn't finished unpacking from their move and cheerfully told me to take care of their belongings while they were away. When Rob and Jocelyn's family returned from their 2-night, 3-day trip, they were in uproar in front of our house.
"Hey, let us in. Why doesn't the key work?"
"What are you thinking? Enough is enough."
Actually, while they were away, I had the movers move Rob and Jocelyn's belongings outside. The items were delivered to Rob's parents' house, where I had explained the situation beforehand. Out of kindness, I left some immediately needed items in the parking area. Of course, Rob and Jocelyn called me furiously. I told Rob, "Since the house is in my name and I'm the one paying for it, there is no need for me to leave. You can take the car. It's yours now." Rob was furious, claiming,
"I'm your husband, so I have the right to enter the house."
I calmly replied, "No, we're getting a divorce, so you'll lose that right." Rob hesitated, then protested.
"What do you mean by divorce?"
I told him, "You must think I'm clueless. On the days you said you were going out with Jocelyn's family, you were actually meeting your mistress. I've already found out." Whether the call was on speaker or not, I heard Jocelyn whisper in the background,
"She knows?"
and Rob shushing her. Yes, Rob had been meeting with a coworker he was having an affair with on those days. Jocelyn's family knew and had been covering for Rob. I started to suspect when things didn't add up, and Jocelyn's children mentioned,
"Uncle always goes off on his own."
I told Rob, "Not only will you not enter this house, but I will also be demanding compensation. Good luck." Furthermore, "Oh, by the way, if you're willing to pay off the house mortgage in full, I might consider giving you the house, but I doubt that's possible. And Jocelyn, since you and your family are even less related to me than Rob, if you continue to cause trouble, I will call the police. Please leave." Finally, Rob and Jocelyn were left speechless. Despite being defeated, Jocelyn couldn't resist saying something.
"But you can't possibly afford such a mortgage without Rob's salary, right? You're just a nurse or a physical therapist or something, aren't you? What are you going to do now?"
I asked, "Excuse me, a nurse? Is that what Rob has been telling you?" To which Jocelyn replied,
"Yes. When I asked about Mandy's job before, he said it's nothing significant, just a medical worker."
I clarified, "Well, it's true that I'm in the medical field, but I'm a doctor." Jocelyn was speechless as I continued. Rob disliked the idea of others knowing I earned more than him, so he told his friends I was just a medical worker. Well, as I've said, it's not entirely incorrect. Don't worry, Jocelyn. I have a good income, and I've been paying for the house and car loans all along. Soon after, I heard Rob and Jocelyn start arguing over the phone. It got noisy, so I hung up and didn't answer any further calls. I don't know what happened to them after that, but Rob and Jocelyn eventually left. In the aftermath, through discussions facilitated by a lawyer, I successfully finalized my divorce from Rob and secured compensation. Jocelyn and her family attempted to return to their previous apartment, but they had frequently failed to pay rent on time and caused trouble, so the landlord refused them. Now they are moving between their car for shelter. A few months later, Rob contacted me angrily saying,
I got a call saying the car payments haven't been made. What's going on?
Laughing, I replied, well, it's in your name, so obviously. Goodbye, and hung up. I no longer communicated with Rob and Jocelyn after that. Despite their unreasonable behavior, Rob's parents were sensible people, and I learned the rest of the story from them. They were tired of being asked for money due to Jocelyn's husband's past debts and decided to cut ties with Rob and Jocelyn, especially after Rob's affair. Rob's parents had long considered severing ties with them due to their problematic behaviors since their youth. When I informed them of the situation, they apologized and said,
You can send their belongings to our house for now.
They placed the delivered items in their yard and told Rob and Jocelyn to collect them within a week or they would be discarded. Rob and Jocelyn are still looking for a new place but are struggling due to their current unstable living situation. Jocelyn's husband's debts, food expenses, and Rob's car loan are causing their financial troubles to increase. Jocelyn was a stay-at-home mom, and neither her husband nor Rob had high-paying jobs. It was clear they would struggle without me. Rob and Jocelyn now blame each other and spend their days arguing in their car. I was only worried about Jocelyn's 3 kids, but fortunately Rob's parents agreed to take care of them until their parents' situation stabilizes. Although Rob's parents have cut ties with Rob and Jocelyn, they couldn't abandon their grandkids and have taken on their care. I'm relieved and grateful for this, as I deeply care for the children. Currently, I'm enjoying my days with my daughter in our original home. The house may be too big for just the 2 of us now, but it could accommodate a new partner and their children if I remarry. If not, selling it once my daughter is independent is also an option. Going through this has shown me how vital it is to stand my ground and reject controlling family members from the beginning.
Get out, you low-brained, bottom-of-the-barrel wife earning $7 an hour. Don't act like a mother when you're not. Low income. I have been living with my husband and his child. However, they both dislike me and have always looked down on me. Fine. Tired of living in this home, I decided to leave. Afterwards, my husband and his child would regret looking down on me once they discovered my true identity. My name is Catherine. I turned 53 this year. I married my husband, John, at 35 and have been living with him and his daughter, Elizabeth, the 3 of us together. John is 4 years younger than me, at 49, and Elizabeth is 22. I'd like to say our family is doing well, but that's far from the truth. I met my husband at a social mixer, and he was very gentlemanly during our courtship, respecting my opinions and seemed like a wonderful person. Aware that he was divorced with a child, Elizabeth, I decided to marry him, wanting to cherish both. However, once married, John's attitude completely changed, looking down on me for only having a high school education and pushing all household chores onto me, making him seem quite terrible from the outside. Elizabeth was never really fond of me from the start, and despite my efforts, she has joined John in looking down on me. She has never thought of me as her mother, always behaving as if she's in a constant state of rebellion. Their treatment towards me got worse when I began working. Before marriage, I worked full-time, but after marrying, I became a stay-at-home mom to take care of young Elizabeth. However, the daily oppression from John and Elizabeth was unbearable, prompting me to start working again when Elizabeth entered high school. I thought earning money might change their view of me, but in the end, they mocked me for being low-educated and supposedly incapable of earning much. Initially, I thought this was normal for all families after marriage, but upon consulting a friend, I realized our situation was abnormal. Despite me working, neither John nor Elizabeth would help with household chores, and they would criticize the dinner menu daily. Recently, I've been amazed at how they can come up with such a variety of insults. Elizabeth has secured a job at a mid-sized company starting this year, but she has no intention of leaving home. I wish she would leave soon, but she seems to have decided to spend her life in this house until marriage. To be honest, I'm completely exhausted from this lifestyle. Even after returning home from work, I have no time to rest, and my weekends are consumed by household chores. While contemplating divorce, a major incident occurred. As usual, I returned home from work to find John and Elizabeth already home, seated at the dining chairs. "Aren't you home late?" "I'm hungry." "Quite the life for a part-timer, eh?" "There's no need for overtime." "I'm sorry. I'll start cooking right away." I began to hurriedly prepare a meal with the ingredients I had bought after work. They fidgeted and insulted me while waiting for the food, so I decided to make something quick. However, cutting corners or having too few dishes would result in scolding, so I had to prepare at least 5 dishes. Due to rushing more than usual, the meal was ready in about 30 minutes. "Sorry for the delay." "Dinner's ready," I said, laying out the dishes on the table. After setting everything up, for some reason, neither of them made a move to start eating. "What's wrong? Aren't you two going to eat? You said you were hungry, right?" Just as I asked that, the intercom rang. It was already past 7 p.m., and we weren't expecting any visitors today. Deliveries should go to the delivery box, so it couldn't be a delivery person. Wondering who it could be, as I was about to respond, John pushed past me and headed towards the entrance. When my husband returned after talking with someone for a while, he was holding a plastic bag. "Look, it finally arrived. Let's eat." "Yay! It's been so long since we had pizza. Let's eat." I'm so hungry, my stomach could stick to my back. It seems they had ordered pizza before I got home. "What's this?" I tried asking, but they just grinned while stuffing their faces with pizza. They had no intention of eating the meal I prepared. If that was the case, they could have told me before I started cooking. They didn't mention it at all, even after I had started, and I hurried thinking they were waiting for the meal. Surely, they just wanted to harass me by doing this. That day, I wrapped my plate in cling film and put it in the fridge, then went to bed without eating anything. The smell of pizza wafted from the living room. But I couldn't bring myself to eat anything now. There had been instances of them belittling me and excluding me before. But this was the first time they had harassed me so blatantly. I couldn't help but cry in bed that day, feeling down. I had wanted to improve our family relationship, but it seemed I was the only one who thought so. The next day, I wore fake glasses to hide my red, swollen eyes from crying and went to work. From then on, we stopped eating together. It seemed pointless to cook if they wouldn't eat it, wasting both food and time. Plus, I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of seeing me despair over not being eaten. So, I stopped cooking altogether. Though I barely kept up with cleaning, I didn't clean their rooms. The shared spaces remained clean, but their personal rooms appeared quite messy. You're failing as a wife if you're slacking on the housework, despite being just a part-timer. There's no point in cooking if you won't eat it, and I work too, you know? Shut up. Are you talking back to your husband? Any attempt at a rebuttal would result in my husband furiously yelling at me. Gradually, I stopped arguing back, and our marital relationship quickly cooled. Feeling uncomfortable in such an environment, Elizabeth rarely came home, returning only in the middle of the night when she did. At first, I thought I needed to act like a mother and scold her. But the more I scolded, the more Elizabeth rebelled, and she recently started making comments about educational backgrounds, just like my husband. "You're just a high school graduate, right? It's unbelievable considering both Dad and I graduated from prestigious universities. Even if I'm a high school graduate, I work hard at my job. Working hard at your job. As if a part-timer earning $7 an hour. My time as a part-timer earning $7 an hour was a long time ago. That's how little interest Elizabeth has in me. Even after living together for 18 years, she still doesn't call me mom. Since getting a job at a mid-sized company, she's been mocking my educational background and looking down on my job. Then, one day, my husband brought a colleague home without informing me. I hadn't prepared any food, and the room was only somewhat cleaned. See? I told you. The room is a mess, and she doesn't cook for us. Hey, if you're bringing someone over, you could have told me in advance. I did tell you. It's your fault for forgetting. My husband started drinking with his colleagues in the living room, laughing and complaining about me not cooking, then ordering takeout again. If I had known he was bringing someone, I would have prepared, but he didn't say anything. He claims he called, but there's no record of it on my smartphone, nor any voicemail on the landline. Why does he want to embarrass me like this? I greeted his colleague and then headed to my room. Can you believe her? So useless. I heard, but I don't care what my husband's colleague thinks of me. And the next morning, I sighed at the sight of the messy living room. Time passed, and one day, I was suddenly called into the living room by the two of them. While relaxing in my room after work, they banged on the door, demanding I come to the living room with the force of kicking the door down. Expecting another dose of their sarcasm, I reluctantly got up and headed to the living room. There, with smirks on their faces, the two of them were seated, urging me to sit down as well. What's this about? As if they had been waiting for my question, the two of them began to speak with great enthusiasm. The low-brained, bottom-of-the-barrel wife earning $7 an hour should get out. Don't act like a mother when you're not one. Low income. I hadn't expected such a conversation, but I remained calm. What do you mean by get out? To this, my husband began to say that despite being a lowly wife who works part-time for $7 an hour, I don't cook or clean, and I only bring shame upon him. Moreover, he accused me of not making any effort to get along with Elizabeth and lacking the awareness of being a mother. Of course, I strongly objected to my husband's claims. I have tried my best to become a family with you too. You're the ones who disregarded that. It's your talking back that I also don't like. Exactly. Either stay as a slave for life or get out. Choose. Through my job, I interact with many people. While I do encounter individuals with mean spirits, none are as twisted in character as John and Elizabeth. Until now, I endured for the sake of appearances and their feelings, but if they say I should leave, then perhaps I should. Fine. I'll leave. After telling them this, I went back to my room to start packing. They seemed panicked for a moment when I agreed to leave so readily, perhaps thinking I was just bluffing. As I was packing, they taunted me from behind. Pretending to be strong, huh? If you beg on your knees, we might let you stay. Of course, you'd have to take care of all the housework. That's all you're good for. I had resolved not to cry, but the frustration of not being able to connect with them and not living up to my convictions made me tear up involuntarily. Hearing my sniffling, they seized the opportunity to continue their taunts. See, you were just pretending to be strong. Beg for forgiveness while crying. Isn't it embarrassing for an adult to cry? I could never show someone my crying face. I wiped my tears with my sleeve and glared at them. But such intimidation had no effect, and they just laughed at me. After packing my belongings into a large suitcase, I left the house with the two of them still laughing behind me. To them, my actions might have seemed like running away. Showing tears was unexpected for me as well. But it just showed how seriously I had tried to engage with them. Holding back my frustration, I dragged my suitcase back to my parents' house. Having informed my parents before leaving, my mother, Hillary, and my father, Ken, were waiting with warm tea. Touched by my family's kindness, I found myself crying again. I'm sorry for ending up like this. It's all right, take some time to rest now. You've done nothing wrong, so stand tall. That day, exhausted from crying, I went to bed earlier than usual. The next day, I took time off work. I had never taken a day off since starting at my current job. Hearing that I was off, my colleagues sent emails offering encouragement and concern for my well-being. After reading each message, I realized how blessed I am to have such supportive people around me. Coming home used to mean facing shouts and being berated to do housework. It's easy to feel worthless when that's all you encounter. But now, away from John and Elizabeth, I'm different. I have so many people supporting me, and I take pride in my work. As advised by my parents, I spent a few days without giving much thought to anything, unable to bear the thought of being family with those two any longer. Having made my decision clear, I immediately filled out a divorce form and sent it to the house where John and Elizabeth lived. After a while, having received the divorce form, my husband called me. "Hey, what's this about divorce? Are you joking?" "I'm not joking. You're the ones who kicked me out, right? It only makes sense to divorce if I'm leaving. I will never allow a divorce." I instinctively moved the smartphone away from my ear as my husband shouted loudly. After all the oppression he put me through, I couldn't believe he had the audacity to say he didn't want a divorce. He probably thought I wouldn't say anything and that I'd never leave. Even when he told me to leave, it was just words that slipped out without any real intent behind them. He doesn't actually want to divorce me. I know why he doesn't want a divorce. First, he would lose a housekeeper who takes care of everything at home. John is incapable of doing any housework, and Elizabeth has never learned to do anything from her parents, so of course, she can't either. Without me silently handling everything, the house would quickly become a garbage dump. It would be the same situation as after he separated from his previous wife, a scenario I had witnessed when I was invited over. Another reason is that my parents own a business. Although it's a conversation for much further down the line since my parents are still healthy, I suspect he's eyeing the inheritance. When we first got married, he made comments like this. "If only you could inherit the company, then I wouldn't have to work a day in my life. That's impossible. I have a brother, after all." Yeah, right. Guess I'll have to look forward to the inheritance then. I vividly remember that conversation. I thought it was incredibly insensitive, but at the time, I didn't say anything. My father's company is considered a mid-sized business within its industry, well known enough that if I hand out a business card, people immediately recognize who I am. So, he probably thinks I'll receive a substantial amount of money when the inheritance is divided. Knowing this possibility, I wonder why I ever fell for such a person. Anyway, I'm going to divorce you. So, you're abandoning us? Just like my ex-wife, you're going to leave emotional scars on Elizabeth too. You have the nerve to say that. Do you know what my friends call you too? A pair of selfish monsters. As I said this, my husband freaked out and hung up the phone unilaterally. He called me, yet he hangs up on his own terms. I didn't expect the divorce to be easy, but dragging it out would be too draining for me. So, to wrap things up quickly, I decided it was best to visit John and Elizabeth in person. Timing my visit for when both would be home, I headed to the house I had lived in for 18 years, which now felt like it belonged to someone else. Taking a deep breath, I steeled my resolve and rang the doorbell. John opened the door with a triumphant look on his face, having seen me through the intercom monitor. "What, you came back after all, huh?" Apparently, John thought I had admitted defeat and returned. But I was here today solely to discuss the divorce, not to come back home. John opened the door wide to let me in, but seeing that I had no intention of entering and only carried a handbag, his irritation grew. "What's with the minimal luggage? And come on in already. I want to talk about something, so please meet me at the nearby cafe." "Huh? We can talk inside the house. Then, I'll be waiting at the cafe. Please bring Elizabeth with you." I spoke coldly and formally, ignoring his protests as I walked towards the cafe. About 30 minutes after I arrived at the cafe, an angry John and a sullen Elizabeth showed up. It doesn't take more than 10 minutes to walk from the house to the cafe, but convincing Elizabeth to come probably took some time. Elizabeth has always been selfish like her father, often throwing tantrums about not wanting to go out. They found me and sat down heavily on the sofa in front of me. "So, what's this talk about? Why drag us out here, seriously? I have plans later, so can we make this quick? I asked you here today to talk about the divorce. I know my husband doesn't want to divorce, but Elizabeth seems indifferent. If it's just about having someone to do the housework, he could remarry someone else. And since I earn so little from my part-time job, I can't even ask for an allowance, so it probably doesn't matter to her. Even though my family is well off, Elizabeth seems uninterested in the uncertain future of inheritance." I decided to end the conversation quickly by showing my husband a paper stating that I would renounce any claim to our assets and proceed with the divorce. Since it also meant giving up our joint savings, my husband hesitated for a moment. "We have about $100,000 in our joint savings, right? Are you sure about this?" "Yes, I'm willing to let it go if you'll sign the divorce papers right now. But if you hesitate, I'll call off this deal and take it to court." "A court case? That's a bit extreme, isn't it? $100,000 sounds amazing. Just go ahead and divorce already." My husband seemed troubled, but perhaps the immediate availability of $100,000, plus Elizabeth's encouragement, made it more appealing than the uncertain future of my parents' inheritance. As a result, he signed the divorce papers on the spot. "So, the $100,000 is really ours, right?" "Of course, I've prepared a document stating so." As I handed over the paper confirming my renunciation of assets, they began to rejoice openly. Their laughter would only last so long. It's unusual to give up one's assets so readily. But to them, looking down on me, it never occurred to doubt my decision. By the way, I forgot to mention, I'm currently a president of a company. Unable to comprehend my words, they froze mid-laughter, then glanced at each other and laughed again, dismissing it as a joke. "President? What are you talking about? You're a part-timer earning $7 an hour, aren't you?" "Exactly. Your lies won't make us feel any regret. You know my father runs a company, right? So what?" Their disbelief was understandable since the company was originally expected to be inherited by my brother. However, circumstances changed a few years ago. My brother decided to pursue his dreams in America, leaving the company without a successor just as my father was planning to retire. Arriving in search of a job, I was then proposed to take over the company. Initially hesitant, I accepted, thinking it's better to have money than not. Looking back, I believe my decision was correct. If I hadn't taken over as president, I wouldn't have been able to demand a divorce so confidently. As I shared this, they looked at me incredulously. "You're the president? That's impossible. Does that mean you're earning a lot?" "Well, if I had to give a rough figure, I suppose the company makes about $50 million a year." $50 million? Wait a minute, what about the divorce papers we just signed? The divorce papers? They're in my bag. As my husband tried to snatch the divorce papers back, he was stopped by someone who suddenly appeared. It was my father, who had come along, fearing I might be mistreated during our discussion. He had been sitting behind me all along, listening to the entire conversation. So, what happens to your father's inheritance then? I will inherit everything related to the company. What? That's ridiculous. After all this time, putting up with everything for the inheritance. If we had settled the divorce with conditions, the inheritance would have been mine. Knowing his true intentions were now clear, he must be furious. The strength of my father's grip on my husband's arm clearly showed his anger. How dare you treat my daughter so poorly? And the stepchild is equally to blame. Huh? Why am I to blame? I didn't do anything. Elizabeth, be quiet for a moment. Ken, what you heard earlier, well, it was a misunderstanding, you know? Misunderstanding? That was your true intention. My husband seemed to shrink under my father's loud scolding. He could be bold against those weaker than him, but not against someone of my father's stature, especially now knowing his interest was in the property. Unbelievable. You promised to cherish my daughter, yet you married her for her inheritance. Well, anyone would be tempted by money. So, you won't admit your fault to the end. It's irrelevant now that we're divorcing, but I regret spending so much time with such a weak man. Eventually, my husband couldn't say anything more due to my father's imposing presence, so we left the cafe. I felt an unprecedented sense of liberation when I went to submit the divorce papers. Later, a panicked Elizabeth called me. What's the meaning of this? A rescinded job offer? Apparently, Elizabeth was panicking over an email about her job offer being rescinded. What do you mean? Someone like you wouldn't be hired. This is unfair. I'll sue. The mid-sized company Elizabeth was supposed to join was actually the one I took over from my father. I found out about her job offer when HR showed me the applicants' resumes. Initially, despite her unpleasant behavior, I planned to hire her without letting personal feelings interfere. However, after discovering her negative posts about our company on social media, I changed my mind. Given her behavior even before starting, it was clear things would only get worse. There are numerous cases of job offers being rescinded due to social media, so our decision wasn't unusual. Elizabeth's panic, especially a week before the induction ceremony, was understandable. Anyway, I'm coming over with Dad, so wait for us. Elizabeth hung up unilaterally. Later, they showed up at the company. To avoid a scene in front of the company, I reluctantly let them into my office. What's this about Elizabeth's job offer being rescinded? I thought it'd be cool to join since Grandpa was the president. This ruins my plans. Plans? Yeah, if I could say Grandpa was the president, everyone would be jealous. Plus, I thought I'd get easy tasks. Elizabeth had planned to use my father's name to gain status within the company. As my ex-husband protested the rescinded offer as unfair, I presented printed evidence of Elizabeth's social media posts. Knowing the potential for social media to affect job prospects, my ex-husband's protests quickly diminished after seeing the evidence. Elizabeth continued to claim the rescission was unfair, but the decision was already made. Hiring her would only bring negative attention to our company, and there was no benefit in doing so. It's far more worthwhile to hire someone who genuinely wants to work with us. Alright, I get it. The rescission of Elizabeth's job offer can't be helped. Wait, what are you saying, Dad? As someone in HR, I'm telling you, just give it up. But we'll still demand what's ours in terms of property. I've already paid the $100,000 from our shared assets. It seems my ex-husband was referring to the money I had saved since taking over the company. However, anticipating such an event, I had only taken a minimal salary as the company's president. The salary I had received so far was saved in the bank as joint property, and most of it was spent on living expenses. The remainder was spent on dining out and attending hobby-related stage shows, so nothing was left. That can't be. You're joking. Right. I'm in trouble if my job offer is rescinded now. You should be grateful you even got the $100,000. After saying this, I called the security guard to have them removed. They tried to storm the company a few more times, but it seemed Elizabeth's spirit was broken first. The reason was that Elizabeth started receiving criticism from her friends on social media. Elizabeth, who doesn't think she's done anything wrong, tried to shift the blame onto me. It's your fault my friends are drifting away. Do something about it. That's not my problem. You should handle it yourself. That's so irresponsible. Aren't you a mother? You never thought of me as a mother. Besides, strictly speaking, I'm your former mother now. After saying this, I hung up the phone. Then, my ex-husband called with the same plea, apologizing and asking me to come back home. Please come back home. The house is a mess. Elizabeth doesn't cook either. You could have seen this coming. We're divorced now, I'm not coming back. Don't say that. We loved each other once. Maybe I would have reconsidered if you had shown me even a little bit of support. Bye. After saying that, I blocked my ex-husband's phone number. Time passed, and through a mutual friend, I learned about my ex-husband and Elizabeth's current situation. Elizabeth's job offer was rescinded due to her social media posts, leaving her without a job and, eventually, without friends. She tried to find a new job, but it was too late as all positions were filled just before the start of the business year. In the end, Elizabeth ended up living off part-time jobs. She's juggling work at a convenience store and a supermarket to make ends meet. The reason for this struggle was that my ex-husband got fired. As he worked in HR, he tried to sneak Elizabeth into the company. Just before the induction ceremony, someone canceled due to illness, and he planned to replace them with Elizabeth. However, his boss found Elizabeth, who hadn't been interviewed, at the ceremony and immediately had her expelled. My ex-husband was then subject to an inquiry and eventually fired. Both are now working part-time, unable to afford the luxury they once had. They had to move out of their previous home and now live in a modest apartment in a remote location. I heard they complained to our mutual friend about their situation. Since then, I've been successfully running the company with an annual turnover of $50 million. Various businesses bring their work to us, allowing me to enjoy my job every day. Without the need to do housework for my ex-husband and Elizabeth, my life has become more comfortable. Though I sought refuge at my parents' house for a while, I recently started living alone in the city. Living alone, I can eat whatever I like every day, and I only have to clean up after myself. As someone who enjoys drinking, I look forward to buying some expensive wine and cheese every Friday night for a pleasant evening. I'm not interested in romance anymore, but I do wish for a partner with whom I can share a connection. It doesn't have to be a man, nor do I care about age. While I have many allies, finding someone with whom I can truly connect is not easy. Recently, a woman in my new neighborhood frequently strikes up conversations with me. She once bought me a tulip because she had stopped by a florist. In return, I've brought her sandwiches and souvenirs, and we've become acquaintances who occasionally have tea together. Whether we've truly connected is uncertain, but I'm immensely grateful for how she enriches my daily life. Moving forward, I plan to initiate more conversations with others. Doing so might help me find those who are truly necessary in my life. As I insert the tulip into a vase and enjoy my sandwich, I reflect on these thoughts.
The first story. After Grandma's funeral, her brother said, "I changed the will." My grandmother, Emily, was born in 1925 in a small, rural village in England. Her parents, John and Sarah, had been forced into a loveless marriage after conceiving Emily out of wedlock. When Emily was born, John and Sarah blamed her for ruining their lives and subjected her to relentless abuse. In contrast, her younger brother James, born 3 years later, was doted upon and treated like a prince. When Emily turned 18, her parents forced her to marry a local drunkard. Emily's husband beat her and squandered what little money she earned on alcohol. When she went to her parents for help, they coldly turned her away, saying, "You chose this marriage." After several years, Emily finally managed to divorce her husband. But she was left penniless and had no choice but to return to her parents' home. There, she faced even more abuse. John and Sarah declared they would cut Emily out of their will and leave everything to James. James married and, with John and Sarah's help, built a luxurious mansion. Meanwhile, Emily remarried and gave birth to my mother, but they continued to struggle financially. James and his wife gloated about their children's health and mocked Emily's misfortune. When John passed away, James inherited a vast sum and grew even more arrogant. A few years later, on her deathbed, Sarah confessed to Emily that she had been forced to change her will and handed her a small sum of cash. However, James and his wife took over Sarah's funeral arrangements, completely excluding Emily. When I was 10, Grandma Emily's health deteriorated. My mother desperately cared for her, but Uncle James pressured Grandma to change her will. Secretly, my father took Grandma to a lawyer and had the will changed, leaving James and his wife a mere 10 pence. When Grandma passed away, my mother was consumed by grief. At the funeral, James and his wife behaved atrociously and contested the will. However, when my father revealed the truth about the will, James and his wife were left with nothing, not even the 10 pence. 9 years later, James died. The Christmas card we received included a plea for financial assistance. But my mother burned the card and chose not to attend James's funeral. She chose the bonds of family she cherished. Grandma Emily's life was a tragic one, a victim of her time. But as my mother demonstrated, we can choose our own family. Grandma's story taught us that rather than being controlled by money, it's most important to cherish the bonds with those we hold dear. By learning about my grandmother's tumultuous life, I was able to reflect more deeply on my own. Valuing family bonds over material possessions, that is the greatest lesson Grandma left us. Grandma Emily's story is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of adversity. Despite the cruelty she endured, she never lost her capacity for love, which she passed on to my mother and, in turn, to me. As I reflect on her life, I am struck by the realization that our true wealth lies not in our bank accounts, but in the love and support of our family. Money may provide temporary comfort, but it is the bonds we forge with others that sustain us through life's darkest moments. Grandma Emily's legacy lives on through my mother's unwavering commitment to her loved ones and the values she instilled in me. I am grateful for the opportunity to share her story, and I hope that it serves as a reminder to cherish the family we have, to forgive those who have wronged us, and to never let the pursuit of wealth overshadow what truly matters in life. In the end, Grandma Emily's story is one of hope that even in the face of unimaginable hardship, we have the power to choose our own path, to create our own family, and to leave a legacy of love that will endure long after we are gone. It is a lesson I will carry with me always, and one I will strive to pass on to my own children someday. To my dear Grandma Emily, though you are no longer with us, your spirit lives on. Thank you for the love you gave, the lessons you taught, and the strength you instilled in us. You will forever be missed, but never forgotten. Rest in peace. The next story. The unconventional inheritance, a grandfather's unique approach to recognizing true family. In today's video, I want to share with you a remarkable story about a dear friend's grandfather and the extraordinary way he chose to distribute his inheritance. This heartwarming tale showcases the importance of genuine care and love within a family, and how those qualities can be rewarded in the most unexpected ways. The dutiful grandson and his friend. My friend, whom we'll call F, approached me with a request for help. His grandfather, who adamantly refused to enter a nursing home, needed assistance with his daily routine. Having just completed my civil service in a retirement home, I had the necessary experience to guide F in caring for his grandfather. Together, we visited him every morning and evening for over half a year, until the grandfather's unfortunate passing from a stroke. The surprising invitation. 2 days after his grandfather's death, F asked me to accompany him to the reading of the last will and testament. To my astonishment, the lawyer had officially invited me, as the grandfather had left me something as a token of appreciation for my service. I was touched by the gesture, but little did I know the surprises that awaited us. The entitled family members. At the lawyer's office, we were greeted by F's father, ED, and uncle, EU, both of whom were known for their entitled attitudes. They questioned my presence and accused me of being a gold digger. F stood up for me, calling out their lack of respect for their late father. As we waited for the other grandchildren to arrive, ED and EU's conversation revolved solely around their extravagant spending plans using the anticipated inheritance money, with no mention of their father's passing or any sense of loss. The unconventional will. The lawyer began reading the grandfather's letter, which detailed a unique point system he had devised to ensure a fair distribution of his assets based on the care and attention each family member had shown him in the last 3 years of his life. Points were awarded for letters, phone calls, visits, and assistance provided. The final tally revealed an astounding disparity. ED, 8 points. EU, 10 points. EUGID 1, 150 points. EUGID 2, 133 points. Brother, 288 points. F, 7,341 points. Me, 5,883 points. The grandfather's assets, once liquidated, would be divided according to the points earned by each individual. The legal battle and secret clause. ED and EU immediately contested the will, claiming that F and I had manipulated the situation. They filed lawsuits, but ultimately lost. Unbeknownst to us, a secret clause in the will stipulated that anyone who challenged the will would forfeit their share of the inheritance. The unexpected windfall and life lesson. 3 years later, when the legal battles concluded, F and I received our shares of the inheritance. The amount was far more than I felt comfortable accepting, and I considered giving some to the other grandchildren. However, F convinced me to accept it, emphasizing that my care for his grandfather, when he needed it most, made me more family than those who had neglected him. This extraordinary story teaches us that true family is not defined by blood alone, but by the love, care, and respect we show one another. The grandfather's unconventional approach to his inheritance highlighted the importance of valuing genuine connections over material gains. May this tale inspire us all to cherish and nurture the relationships that matter most in our lives. The next story. The septic tank checkmate, how my grandfather outsmarted his greedy brother. Hey, everyone, gather around because I've got a wild family story to share with y'all today. This one's about my grandfather and how he cleverly got back at his brother, who had exploited their dying mother for her estate. So, grab a cold one, sit tight, and let's dive into this epic tale of family drama and sweet, sweet revenge. The scheming brother. Picture this, Ireland, about 40 years ago. My great-grandparents were on their last legs, with great-grandma heavily relying on morphine to ease her pain. She was trying to write her will, but the drugs made it hard for her to think straight. Now, her estate was no joke, we're talking multi-millionaire level stuff here. My grandfather, being the stand-up guy he was, always made an effort to keep in touch with his brother, Lee. But one Saturday night, when Granddad went to their usual pub hangout, Lee was nowhere to be found. Turns out, Lee had secretly moved to Ireland to butter up their drugged-up mother, hoping to score her entire estate. Sneaky, right? The unfair will. Fast forward a year, and great-grandma passes away. At the funeral, everything seems fine until they get to the will reading. Turns out, great-grandma was high as a kite when she wrote the will, leaving everything to Lee and nothing for anyone else. The family was fuming, but they couldn't contest the will because it had been signed and witnessed by her attorney. The septic tank loophole. Now, here's where things get interesting. Lee had inherited a huge plot of land in rural Ireland, but there was a catch. The house on the property was right on the edge of the land, and the septic tank was actually on the neighbor's property. Without the septic tank, the house couldn't be sold because it wasn't up to code. But guess what? My clever grandfather knew about this little loophole and bought the surrounding land, including the plot with the septic tank. Checkmate, Lee. The stalemate. Lee, being none the wiser, fixed up the house and got it inspected, only to find out he couldn't sell it without the septic tank being on his land. He tried to buy the plot from the neighbors, but surprise, surprise, they had already sold it to my grandfather, who wasn't budging. Lee had sunk over £300,000 into the house, hoping to resell it for a profit. But now, he was stuck. He couldn't sell the house, and he couldn't install a new septic tank because the land couldn't support it. My grandfather had him in a checkmate position, offering to buy the land for a measly €5,000. The stubborn standoff. To this day, Lee refuses to accept defeat and sell the land to my grandfather. His stubbornness has left him scraping by on his plot, while my grandfather sits back, knowing he got his revenge for Lee's underhanded tactics with their mother's will. So, there you have it, folks. A tale of family betrayal, clever revenge, and the most epic septic tank standoff in history. My grandfather may not have wanted the land itself, but he sure as hell wanted to give Lee a taste of his own medicine. It just goes to show, don't mess with family, especially when there's a septic tank involved. The next story. The twisted tale of my grandparents' inheritance, family drama unleashed. Hey, everyone. Get ready for a wild ride because today, I'm going to share with you the crazy story of my grandparents' inheritance, and how it led to some serious family drama. Buckle up, grab some popcorn, and let's dive into this messy tale of money, betrayal, and long-lost siblings. The inheritance and the plan. So, here's the deal. When I was just a little girl, my grandparents passed away and left me a savings account with over $300K in it. I was supposed to access it when I turned 21, and they left me a letter asking me to share the money fairly with any other Smith-Jones children, aka my full siblings. But plot twist. I never had any full siblings, just 2 half-brothers from my dad's side. Being the sweet sister I am, I decided to split the money equally among the 3 of us. I figured we could each get $100K, and when my youngest brother Mac turned 21, we could split any remaining cash. Sounds like a solid plan, right? The house and the loan. When I finally turned 21, my dad had the brilliant idea of using my $100K to buy a house. I found my dream place, but it was a bit over budget at $130K. Since I couldn't get a mortgage, dear old dad suggested I borrow $30K from the inheritance account. I figured I could pay it back before my brothers turned 21, so I went for it. The confrontation and the contract. Fast forward to when my brother Joe turned 21. As I was handing over his $100K, he noticed the account was a bit short. I explained the situation and promised to put the money back before Mac's 21st birthday. But Joe and Mac weren't having it. They accused me of stealing from them and demanded I pay back the full amount plus interest within 6 months. They even wrote up a contract. The nerve, right? The legal threat and the shocking discovery. I was about to sign the contract when I noticed the 6-month deadline. Nope, not happening. We agreed on 2 years, and I was sticking to it. That's when the boys decided to play hardball and threatened to sue me for the money, plus extra for damages and emotional distress. Give me a break. But here's where the story takes a wild turn. Out of nowhere, I get a message from a guy named Chris Smith, claiming to be my long-lost half-brother. He had proof and everything. Turns out, my grandparents had set up another account for my dad's illegitimate children, and Chris was one of them. Oh, and apparently, I have an 18-year-old half-sister too. Talk about a family reunion. The aftermath and the family fallout. After consulting with a solicitor, I found out that my half-brothers had no claim to either inheritance fund. I told them to back off and enjoy the $50K I'd already given them because that's all they were getting. The fallout was epic. Dad tried to get Chris to share his fund with the boys, but Chris shut that down real quick. The drama didn't end there, though. Turns out, my stepmom had no idea about my dad's other kids, and she was not happy. She kicked him out of the house, and now he's begging me to reconsider. But honestly, I'm done with all of them except for Chris and my newfound sister. So, there you have it, folks. The twisted tale of my grandparents' inheritance and how it tore my family apart. It just goes to show that money can bring out the worst in people. But it can also help you find the family you never knew you had. As for me, I'm focusing on building a relationship with my new siblings and leaving the rest of the drama behind. Remember, life's too short to get caught up in family feuds, especially when there's inheritance money involved. Stay true to yourself and don't let anyone guilt you into doing something you don't want to do. And who knows? You might just find a long-lost sibling or two along the way.